Hi, I'm Dawn Cavanaugh, APQS National Education Director. Today I'm going to teach you about how to use your APQS laser in a different place than you might expect. Of course, we're all used to using it on the rear or pantograph side of the table to do long pantograph rows so that we can cover our quilt with designs that are really super simple and easy to do. All we have to do is follow the line with the laser and we look like awesome quilters. You know, if you can trace, you can quilt. But there's another place that your laser can mount on your APQS quilting machine that makes it another handy tool to use on the front of the machine. You have a post right up near the front of the machine that's for your laser, but lots of people simply use it for a handy scissors tool. Let's learn how to move your laser from the back of the machine up to the front to use it for more special techniques. The first thing we'll need to do is remove the laser cable from the side of the quilting machine. To remove the laser itself from the laser post, simply rotate the laser's mounting knob counterclockwise or to the left to loosen it. This is a spring-loaded mechanism, so once I've loosened the knob, it allows me to push in on the handle. Let me do it again just a little bit more so that you can see. That actually removes some of the pressure that this little piston is placing on the rod itself. Then I can simply slide it right off. After I've loosened this knob, now you can see that as I hold the laser body in one hand and then put my thumb on the top, see if I can get it just right for the camera. There you go. As I push down, you see that the opening enlarges right there at the bottom to make room for it to slide right onto the laser mounting post. So I'll push that down, slide it onto the post, and then of course tighten the knob back up once the laser is in the position that I want it to be. I've removed the laser power cable from the back of the laser for the purpose of this video, but you could leave that also plugged in while you move it up to the front. As I mentioned, lots of quilters tend to think we've put that post on the machine just to keep their scissors nice and handy, but it's actually for using the laser up front right on the top of the quilting machine. So I'm holding that laser once again so that I can get that open hole or bird's mouth to expand when I push the knob on the back side. So I'll squeeze and open up that opening and reach up and slide it right down onto the laser post. I can adjust how high it is and which side of the machine it's angled to, and then once I'm in position, of course, tighten the knob right down. If you removed the laser cable from the back of the laser, of course you're going to need to reinsert it, just like this. Snap it into place. And the opposite end of the cable is going to get plugged in onto the other side of the quilting machine directly into the laser jack. I'm sure you're wondering why in the world you'd want the laser on the front of the quilting machine when there's no paper pantograph to follow. Well, there are lots of cool ways to actually use the laser up here on the front. One of the ways would be to quilt a design or a motif directly onto the fabric and then use the laser to repeat that motif that you actually quilted in different places on the fabric itself. Another cool way to use it is with stencils. Maybe you've got a great collection of stencils, but you're really not thrilled about having to mark the quilt over and over again, or you don't want to risk not having those marks come out. So the laser on the front allows you to use that stencil off to the side of the needle, still follow the stencil path with the laser, but never have to mark that quilt. Or maybe it's a paper pattern that you've come up with or that you've traced, or something fun like maybe all the grandkids' handprints. You've traced them all and you want to quilt them all in a special memory quilt. Even though they're all different shapes and sizes, putting that laser on the front of the quilting machine and placing those paper patterns off to the side allows you the ability to see what you're doing and glance over at the needle, check to make sure that everything is all right. And many people prefer to use the front or freehand side of the quilting machine instead of the pantograph side. They feel much more comfortable there. Let me show you how a tool such as the Hartley work table helps make all this possible. You might be tempted to simply lay your pattern down on the quilt and then use that laser beam to follow it just like that. However, once you get going, that quilt is going to tend to vibrate or bounce a little bit, and it won't take long before you'll become frustrated trying to follow the bouncing laser beam. Instead, it would be well worth your time to invest in a work table such as the Hartley work table or another aftermarket product that allows you to have the support of the pattern directly above the fabric. This table goes across the rollers and keeps everything up and nice and flat. Now I can simply place my pattern directly on this work surface, which means that it'll be much easier to follow it as I go along, and it'll help secure it and keep it in place. If I'm not sure that it'll stay put, I can even use some painter's tape or something to secure the pattern directly to the table so that I know everything will line up correctly for me. To show you how this works, I have stitched a practice square onto my fabric and marked the center of the fabric square. When using the laser, remember that the laser beam and where it shines is representing exactly where the needle is at that moment. So I'll place my needle right in the center of my space, right here on my chalk mark, and then I will align the laser with the center of the quilting the design. Of course, I can move the design around on my work table to meet the laser, but I can also adjust the laser itself on the mounting bracket until the center matches up, making sure that the needle is still directly over my chalk mark on our square. I've moved my APQS quilting machine until the needle is directly over the chalk mark right in the center of my square. And now as I scoot the camera over, you'll see that I've positioned the laser beam so that is also right in the center of the stencil. Now that I know it's there and correct, I'll make sure that the stencil is nice and straight on my work table, and then I'll put a couple of pieces of painter's tape on it, and we'll stitch it out together. Before I begin stitching, I want to show you one little trick that I use to make it easier to make sure that my starting and stopping points are as exact as they can be. Sometimes it's hard to exactly hit your beginning and ending stitching lines when you're following a laser and not looking at the needle. So as I zoom in on my stencil just a little bit, I'm going to focus in on two marks that I've added to the stencil itself. I've used a permanent marker to add those. Take a look. Right here, you'll see a little caret, a mark that reminds me to start in this corner and take off in this direction. See, my brain happens to think in clockwise circles, so I started here to make sure that I'll go around this entire design in a clockwise motion for the best possible outcome for me. But that means that when I come up here, I've got to really pay attention to where I'm ending so that I don't overshoot the landing, so to speak, and I can make my stop very clean. I've drawn two little hash marks or a railroad crossing here to remind me that I'm just about done with my stitching. When I see that come into my line of vision, I actually stop the machine, and then I can use the APQS needle up and down feature to walk my way up stitch by stitch exactly to where I began the stitching, which gives me clean, precise starts and stops. If you're working with a paper design, this is an example of how I've traced that onto a piece of paper. You can do the same type of a thing. Mark your beginning, remind yourself which way you want to go, a little reminder of you're just about done, and then you can turn off the machine and use your needle up and down feature to precisely stop right where you want to end. Before you start stitching, and probably before you even tape your pattern down, it's a good idea to see if you have set the table far enough away from your actual design so that you won't run into it when you're doing the actual quilting on the fabric. Looks like I'm okay for now, so I'll begin by finding my starting point and bringing up my top and bobbin thread. I'll secure my beginning and ending stitches with some tiny stitches using the needle up and down feature. I'm holding the button down and making some baby stitches here. I'm going to start with the needle in the down position so that if I need to stop and figure out where I'm going next or realign, I just have to tap the off button for the sewing motor and I'll be able to catch my breath, reposition, whatever I need to do to make sure I'm on target. I'm going to trim my tails down a little bit shorter and we'll do some stitching. Well, I've come to my hash marks on my design reminding me to stop so that I can actually work my way up to the beginning spot where I first started this pattern. I'll use my needle up and down to bring myself right up to that very beginning again. Let's see if we can focus right there. That'll make my clean start and stop. Well, I know that you can't tell, but I'm right on top of my previous stitching. And if you like to knot and bury your beginning and ending tails, you can move the machine away, come back, take one more stitch right there, and move again. That brings up a loop of bobbin thread. Now, if I've done secure stitches with very teeny tiny stitches right here, I'd be able to cut all of these thread tails and start again. But if you're wanting to knot and bury them with a traditional needle and thread, pull up enough of that loop so that you can get it onto a needle and snip the bobbin and top thread. Now you'll have plenty to be able to go back and thread onto a needle and bury those. Just for today, I'm going to snip those off so that you can see what's going on. Now I do want to make one confession and have you take a look. Look at that lovely oops right there. On this leg of my design. I snuck a peek. Instead of looking over at the design on my work table, I snuck a peek at where my needle was, and of course by the time I looked back at the pattern, I had lost my place. So naturally I need to go back and fix this if this were on a quilt that I was really going to use. You got to keep your eye on the pattern even though the temptation is there to glance over and see what the needle's doing. If you want to glance over, stop at one of the points and make sure that you actually turn the sewing motor off rather, so that you can take off again and make a nice smooth curve. Nobody wants to undo stitches. Well, as you can see, that is a much easier way to position a design right inside the center of the block. And again, that work table or hard surface that you use can be used for a multitude of designs. Anything that you can trace or place on there. Now you may have noticed, since my fabric is very dark underneath my stencil, that occasionally the light would disappear in the crevices of this stencil. If you find that's happening to you when you're using an actual stencil, let's peel that off. Just slide a plain piece of paper right under your stencil. You don't need to go around and trace it again. Oops, I'm hooked on it. There we go. And then you'll see that that laser beam won't disappear, but you'll be able to see it all the way around the stencil. Once in a great while, a customer will contact our service department and apologize for accidentally having turned this knob a little bit too far and having the entire laser assembly come apart in their hands. Well, never fear, I'm going to show you now how to put all of that back together. We'll take all the pieces apart. Here we go. Of course, they probably won't fall off in this nice order for you, but it will help you to visualize how everything's going to go back together again. So we have this little piston piece that the laser post grabs a hold of. We have this little tulip or V-shaped piece. It reminds me of a bird's mouth. That slides right onto the piston. Once this slides in and out, that's what actually grabs a hold of the laser post. Well, next comes the laser body itself. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus enough. There we go. The laser mounting body on one side is flat, but the other side, get the reflection just right, has a divot or an indentation. That indentation has to face the piston or the bird's mouth so that it can slip right inside where it belongs. It doesn't matter right now if you hold it with the laser pointing away from you or towards you, as long as the divot side is accepting the piston. Well, now we've got it all coming out the opposite end here. And before I do that, I'm actually going to take that out 1 second and turn it so that you can possibly see, there it is, a little flat side on this piston. As I rotate it a little bit, you'll see there are actually 2 flat sides. That's not completely round. It's important to note, after we've got the piston into the laser body, because on the other side, right here, this flat side, we're going to put this nice silver little washer. And that washer also has 2 flat sides. See if I can get my fingers to hold it just right. There we go. So slip it on so that the flat sides made up with the flat sides on that piston. Might take a little bit of wiggling around until it all falls down into place. But that silver piece, there we go, should slide right up next to the body. Look at that, we're almost home. Next, we have the little spring that slips right onto the piston, and finally the knob itself. That cup right here is going to encompass the entire spring. The flat side will face away from you. So hold on to that piston and the bird's beak, and hold on to the laser body. Push a little bit so that the spring compresses and start turning the knob. You'll see I'm turning it clockwise to screw it back onto the laser body. Just get it started. You don't want to turn it too far because you're going to want to be able to align the hole with the bird's mouth and then be able to squeeze that spring by pushing on the handle to open up the hole completely and slide it right onto the laser post. There you go. If you're not actually using the laser, it's a good idea to unplug it either from the side of the machine or from the laser so that you can preserve its longevity. The built-in laser is a standard feature on all APQS stand-up quilting machines. So not only can you quilt from the pantograph side, but you can have some fun experimenting with working from the freehand side as well. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our APQS quilting channel on YouTube for more inspirational videos and tips on how to use your long arm quilting machine. Follow us on Twitter, join our conversation on Facebook, and for more helpful tips and to learn more about APQS quilting machines, visit us at apqs.com. Happy quilting!